All right.
Woo! Welcome, YouTube viewers. Tonight we have a very special podcast lined up. We have Lisa Roper Wicker of Widow Jane Distillery.
All right, Lisa.
And many other titles, correct?
Yeah, mom, grandma. Yeah.
Well, those are the actual important ones, correct?
Yeah, they are the important
They
ones.
are the ones that bring us, well, bring us a lot of joy. There's no doubt about that. I don't know if it sometimes it's just no, we won't even go where I was going to go with that. We'll just
That's easy
that
for you to say.
So how are you right now? I mean, in the current, what's your you've had a lot of things happen to you and a lot of different type of things. Has it made your whole distilling experience and as far as work easier, more complicated? I mean, where right now are you? You know, we had you on in September
When we're down at the Bourbon Festival there,
right, and we kind of, but has much changed since then with all the different things that have been happening?
Absolutely, it has. Yeah, that Bourbon Festival was so much fun. The only thing is, Marty was waiting for me to come off the stage there, because I'd just done that talk. And, it's like, excuse me, but I really did need to. He's like, no, you got to come meet my friends. We're going to do this podcast.
Yeah, you had no idea it was going to be an ambush.
I had no idea. And if I'd known, I would have said, can I have 5 minutes for the bathroom, please?
So the whole time you
Oh,
Marty,
and we talked to you for what, 35 minutes, I think.
Minutes? If you would have known, like if that, now that you know us, if that was the case, you wouldn't even have to worry. You could be like, we'd be like, we weren't on a schedule. There was no schedule. You could have even said, hey, can I go to the bathroom right now in the middle? And we would have been cool with that.
Yeah. So if there's any any sense of preoccupation that I was like, my mind was somewhere else. It was. Yeah, it's good to see both.
It was a great interview and a great podcast.
It was fun. It was fun. Yeah, the Bourbon Festival too, with the new format and everything, you kind of wonder because, since I'm also a Bardstonian, that, how it was all going to fall out and everything. But, I think coming out of COVID too, that it couldn't have been any better. It was really,
it was good.
Yeah, that festival, we know Randy, who's the president.
Yeah.
And he just does a fantastic job, but he has a talent. He's run fairs and the Kentucky Derby. He's been a part of that, and he kind of knows. So he really has a really good feel for it. But he also doesn't really quite know he took that position not knowing quite yet, even to this point, how important that position is. Now he's putting the proper importance on it, but I'm saying he doesn't realize that he is actually putting himself in history. His name will be in the Getz Museum as the president, but also there's a lot of things that he's doing that I think people are gonna actually notice, because last year he did it with his hands tied behind his back. I mean, he had all these restrictions, and now hopefully this year he's going to at least just be able to use one hand with the other one tied behind his back.
Yeah, it was awesome. So my daughter's been secretary of the Kentucky Bourbon Festival too for 8 years or something. 7
Okay.
years.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So she's well aware of all the different things that happened once the switch over and all the fun.
Oh yeah, she was on the board through all of that. Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah.
And just for good measures, they had to deal with 6 inches of rainfall Wednesday night before. I mean, that was just unbelievable.
Yeah, it was, but they did it. They pulled
they
it
did.
off.
They
Yeah.
did a very nice job.
They certainly did. I mean, from an industry standpoint, it felt like homecoming, number one, because it's Bardstown, but number two, just industry wise too. I was just amazed at how many people I saw that are friends and and positive acquaintances. I can't say that in the industry. It was a good time. It was a really good time.
Oh yeah, we just
Sure was.
Yeah, we had a blast, and like you said, the amount of people within the industry making up that festival, there was just so many. The first night of the Bourbon in the Air, it was just kind of like you were just there. All the distilleries were putting out their best stuff, overall, and you basically could have what, the free reign. And if you know the distillers, kind of like we did, you were just basically getting like red carpet treatment. It just like you'd walk up and you're like, well, we were at Four Roses with Brent Elliott, and he's
yeah,
like,
sure, here we're sitting with, he's taking time. Then the next day, you expect the scenario should be that Jeff and I are walking and we see Brent Elliott and we say, hey, Brent, if you remember, we met you last night. This was good. No, it was the opposite. Hey, you guys are the Scotchy Bourbon boys. You're Bill, aren't you? It's like, you got to be kidding me. How does he remember us? The next night, or was it 2 nights later, Friday night, when we were at the Beam barbecue, we had people that knew who the Scotchy Bourbon boys was that recognized us when we were in line to get our food. There was a couple from Texas. There was a couple from Alaska that knew who we were and were calling us by name and asking us how we were doing.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
yeah. And Brett pulled out he's like, we had gotten there, and he's like, you got any more of the Four Roses limited edition 2021? And we're like, really? And he's like, so all of a sudden he's got a bottle, he's pouring it. We're just like, yeah.
And when I'm in a crowd and somebody calls my name, the next thing I listen to real closely is if I hear a weapon cocking, It's like, depends on who's asking,
Well, we had the honor, our brand had the honor of being the first non-Kentucky bourbon invited to the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. And
wow, that's awesome.
That's awesome.
Because it was not premeditated. It was towards the, because of some people having to drop out for different reasons, for COVID reasons, or for, obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Steve Coombs called me and said, can are you coming home? And I said, I am coming home. And he said, can you fill in? And the fact that I was like, sitting there on one panel with, Johnny Hargrove and Charlie Downs. And so, yeah, Charlie, so the thing is, I'm sitting there too, knowing that we're not going to be 100% non-Kentucky soon. Right.
Right.
So
right.
I know all this stuff, and I'm sitting there with Charlie, and Charlie's a Heaven Hill guy, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, this is just crazy. And then I was on another panel with Drew, the master blender from Sazerac, and Dave Schmier, on another one too. And I know Dave, for a long time, and so anyway, it was just a real honor to be there, and the fact, and so my daughter, being the secretary of the Bourbon Festival, she's like, she goes, I wouldn't have done it. I said, you wouldn't have done what? She's like, call you.
Yeah.
Thanks loads.
But that's the difference between one of your children and then somebody else it's like Steve. If you get a call from Steve Coombs, usually he has that demeanor, right? It's just kind of like he just had, there's an aspect of such friendliness, and and he's just, I could see why you would say yes to that.
Yes. Yeah. No, anyway, she was so funny. She's like, I just don't think it's right.
When we're there next fall, you're going to have to introduce us to her.
Yes, she is. Yeah, Anyway, she and her husband own Harrison Smith House in Bardstown on the roundabout, the big yellow house.
Okay.
Okay.
Do all the private events and everything. And for 5 years, it was a 5-year agreement that they started and founded Star Hill Provisions. My son-in-law was the executive chef for Maker's Mark for 5 years. And so it's, it's all in the family, right?
Well, my son's a sous chef.
Awesome.
Well, that's kind of cool. Just go into that. I mean, your children, they're growing up.
They're very grown up. Yeah.
And you're like, while you're going through your journey, which started in wine, correct? Mm-hmm. And then when you started to get into bourbon, now how old were they when you started into that? Like high school age?
Oh no, they were. My oldest is turning 38.
Okay, so they were even. See,
I'm way up there. Yeah.
Well, I'm up there too.
I was gonna say, were you 5 when you got into this industry, or what?
my oldest is 34. So
there you go.
Yeah, so is mine. My oldest is 34.
Okay, yeah, she's turning 38. My son's turning 36, and my youngest will be 30 this year. So, yeah. So anyway, they she was, when I started as a farmhand making wine, she had just started college.
Okay.
So yeah, so 21 years ago, 21
What
years
did
ago,
you
yeah.
do before you were making wine?
For 6 years, I had founded and was running, I was the costume mistress for a small professional dance company. I'd started a costume shop and was costuming ballets, yeah, and musicals.
My
Future daughter-in-law.
my future daughter-in-law just graduated Kent last year, and she is in she's just got firsthand up in Cleveland at the Playhouse Square, but then now they just that theater company switches out to Utah, so they're going to be in May moving out to Utah.
Very
And
cool.
lots of back and forth kind of stuff.
Right.
But you know, that's what she's trying to do. But I'm sure you know how all that works, right?
Yes. Yeah. So that's what I was doing when I got called. The winemaker that I went to work for, I'd known him for years, right? And he, well, actually I back it up. So one of the kindergarten moms, two of the kindergarten moms for my youngest, were working in a winery in Southern Indiana, and they were short people to harvest grapes. And they're like, we're going to harvest these grapes. We think, we would love for you to join us. I'm like, sure. I didn't think about it. I was just like, okay. So anyway, I had a fall that was crazy where I was harvesting grapes and costuming a full nutcracker at the same time. So that was a little crazy, but yeah. And then after that, a friend of mine that had, had an established winery, I'd known him for years. He'd been the winemaker for a winery of a friend of mine when I was growing up in high school and college. And so and we'd lived all over the country, and we'd move back to the state. We lived in a different place, but we'd move back to the state. And, he, every time I was in the winery, he's like, when are you coming to work for me? When are you coming to work for me? Cause he knew I didn't mind getting dirty and enjoyed the outdoors and everything. And so finally one day he calls me and said, I really want you to come to work for me. And I just said, yes. I had this costume shop and I knew I needed to be outside after doing the farmhand gig, and yeah, that's how it all started. Right. And so 3 days in, he said, what did I finally say to you to, get you to come to work for me? And I said, I don't know, but it was an omen. Right. And, yeah. And 3 days in, I knew that's what I was supposed to be doing all along.
Awesome.
Well, I think it wasn't what he said. It's what the situation led up to. You didn't realize exactly what he was offering until you got that farmhand kind of thing. And then you understood what you wanted to do because you loved it, obviously, somewhat. And then he asked, so that's just good. What did he say? He just had great timing, right?
It was all, yes, exactly. It's all, and I have a tendency to say yes to things and then figure it out later. But yeah, and I'd gotten exposed to it in high school and college. I grew up in Bloomington, Indiana University. And, my childhood friend, his dad was a law professor at IU and also had a winery and was trying to get the Indiana Farm Winery laws passed. So he, somebody could actually have a winery and support their family and it be a viable business, because there were no Sunday sales in Indiana actually until recently. Right. And, but they got it passed so that there would be Sunday sales for wineries so that they, could succeed.
Well, so, all right. So let's just one more, I'll ask the last question before we go back onto the podcast is, so then you're doing the winery thing. Now, my daughter's a sommelier. She was working she lived in Brooklyn, worked in
she did. Okay.
Manhattan. She worked at oh my God. She worked in the restaurant where Robert De Niro's hotel is.
I'm calling her and telling her.
That I forgot. Yeah, La Trattoria. I think
I had to ask my youngest daughter again recently. I'm like, I know exactly what you do for your job, but you have to remind me what the business name is called. Yeah.
Isn't it fun? It's just fun just getting older. You're just like, it's kind of there. And when she worked there, I had gotten it down. And actually, she took us to a winery in the Red Hook district. And I think we went to King's is it
Kings County
Yeah,
Distillery?
we
Yeah.
stopped off there. We didn't.
Yeah, well, is it Red Hook Winery? That's just literally down the street from
Yep,
us. It was
yep, that's
yeah.
where it was. And then we were
Oh,
walking.
that's our neighborhood. That you were just a block and a half from the 2
Oh,
blocks from the distillery.
And I was still new at the time because she took us down there. And when I saw, you know, the distillery that was there, we stopped in and had a tasting. And that was just like, that's like right about 2.5 years ago. So it was right when I was getting into this. And then, so when I've always known that you were in that district from the start, you know, just from the first time I ever saw that and you were running that, I knew that. We looked into it, you know, then we looked into, you know, how you're doing things and everything. But what got you from wine to whiskey? Because I need to tell my daughter that she needs to do this, because she as a sommelier, she went out to Portland and she did the winemaking and all the grapes and the cleaning of all the stuff. She worked there out there in that area in Oregon, and she's basically coming off her first harvest, you know.
Oh, awesome. Yes, awesome. That's awesome.
But I got to figure out how to get her into bourbon. So maybe you can tell me what flipped it over, because
the man that trained me to make wine, really, I mean, he was also a whiskey drinker. And so when you're talking about palate and blending and everything, and you know, we started comparing notes. He's the one that really got me into drinking whiskey, and we started comparing notes, you know, because also if you're blending with wine all day long, you know, now I frequently drink wine in the evening since I blend whiskey all day long. And yeah, so we started comparing notes. He gave me the bug for distilling, right? And to the point where he and his son and I were the production crew. And at one point we proposed like a still in the winery, you know, to his wife. And she was a very wise woman. She said, absolutely not. And she, you know, rightfully so. That was probably a really good decision on her part. So, but anyway, he gave me the bug, right? And so when my youngest was her last year of high school, the people we were buying grapes off of from Kentucky, because we were in southern Indiana, they came and said, we're not going to have grapes for you next year. We're going to open a winery of our own. And my boss looked at them and said, you should hire Lisa as your consultant. She's ready. And he and I never discussed it. We'd never discussed me working anywhere else. But I had been saving all my money and going out to University of California, Davis, and doing different intensives on fermentation and filtration and everything. So on top of what, he's an insanely smart man. So on top of what he taught me, I was able to come back and say, okay, so why are you doing it this way, right? Why was I taught this way? And why have you adapted it to this? And so those conversations were having. A woman named Ellie Butz. She was a retired Purdue professor. She was still at Purdue at the time when I met her. And then she moved to Lallemand Yeast and worked for them for years. But I was fortunate, and she saw something in me and kind of took me under her wing too. So I had her as a resource, and the whole Purdue, you know, extension crew and everything. So yeah, so that's what happened there.
Well,
so anyway,
that's
so
amazing.
This vineyard's in, of all places, Marion County, Kentucky, right? So I had already got the distilling bug, and I am consulting down there, and she didn't know I was willing to move. And she said, I think I'd like to hire you as my winemaker. I said, okay. Like I said, didn't discuss it with my family. It's like, oh yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
and we'll
yeah.
figure that out.
Yes, and then
Details.
find out that I'm moving to Kentucky. So that was like in April. So I worked long distance, you know, back and forth, so that my, you know, daughter could obviously finish up school and everything. So the week we moved her into college, I moved to Kentucky, and yeah, it was crazy. We still had the house for a little bit, and then, you know, sold it the next spring. But yeah, it was like baptism by fire. We had to, you know, hit the ground running, and had just a crazy successful first year. We came out of the gates pretty strong, but we'd retrofitted a barn until we could get the winery built. And you know, so just all kinds of craziness. But during that time, I meet Steve Beam from Limestone Branch, because the winery is just, you know, where I was working at in Calvary, Kentucky, at the end of this dead end road in this barn, was just a few miles, you know, like 4 miles from where the distillery is. And so we got to fast barns.
What was the name of the winery?
It was White Moon. It's not there anymore, because that's part of the story. I mean, what happened was they went through a real spectacular divorce. And so in the divorce, the winery got dissolved, and I saw the writing on the wall. So I had thought I'm going to have to resign because they are, wineries, unfortunately, it's not an unfamiliar way for a winery to go down. And so I book a ticket, I resign, I book a ticket to Sonoma thinking, well, I'm going to have to go to Sonoma and work a harvest and then come back to Kentucky and regroup. But, I have to do it early enough so I have time to find a job and get located out there. And so I do all of that, and Paul and Steve Beam, because I'd already been working with Steve in the evenings at the distillery on different projects already. And so they took me to dinner 24 hours after I resigned the winery and gave me a full-time job at Limestone Branch.
Very good.
I got into distilling a lot faster because I thought I was going to get a still at the winery. I'd worked my way onto the legislative committee with the wine group, thinking that I was going to, help have the laws passed so that I could get a still in the winery, which is, not in the Kentucky law. And I'd already started making brandy bases for Steve to distill. So it all worked out, like I said, I got into distilling a lot faster. The goal was already there. It just happened a lot faster. And then the next 3 years were just baptism by fire. I was there until Luxco fired me, right? Because when they purchased Limestone Branch, I was the number 2 guy and I got let go. And then
Luxco let you go when they picked up Limestone.
They did.
Oh, wow. You're making them regret. Well, they don't regret it that much considering they're MGP now, right?
All right. Yes. Yeah.
So,
I mean, I don't know how they feel about it now. I have no idea, but I don't know anyone there anymore. But
that's in the rear view mirror. So
in the rear view mirror, yeah. For a minute, I thought I was going to have to go back to winemaking, but craft distilling had just exploded, even in the time that I was with Steve. And so I actually had an offer my last official day at Limestone Branch in South Carolina, and I turned it down. They countered with consulting. So I consulted there until while I was still looking. Then I got an offer from another amazing distillery, craft distillery that we all know. And they gave me a good offer. I was getting ready to accept it on a Friday, and Ted Huber called me. And I know Ted for years because of winemaking. I did not know he'd added a grain distillery. And he found out I was in the market and said, Lisa, we need to talk. I'm interested in hiring you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Ted, I've got this offer on the table. And I told him from whom, and I'm going to accept it on Friday. And he's like, well, let's talk on Thursday. And a snowstorm hit. And he said, I called the other people. I gambled and called the other people and said, I need to wait a couple more days before I give you an answer. And I saw Ted and Dana, his wife Dana, on Sunday, and they knocked the other offer out of the park, not just monetarily, but with what I was going to be able to do and learn and how much control I was going to have. And so
competing offers are nice.
Yeah. And who knew, after the day I got fired, oh my gosh, it was, a month before Christmas. My mother had passed away 4 months earlier. I just gotten off of crutches from stress fractures from overuse at the distillery because of too much physical labor in the distillery. I mean, and I'd had my first real car accident.
Oh no.
And I got fired. Oh my gosh, it was not a good fall, right? And here I am in Kentucky, and I'm away from my friends and away from my family, and it was quite. And then only to find out that the day after or a couple days after I got off crutches, I still have my crutches in my truck. I have a car accident, and then they fire me the next day or two.
Oh, well, that's horrible.
Yeah, it was kind of a low Christmas. I mean, but like I said, I was already working. I'd already been in South Carolina and had talked to, and right after Christmas is when I talked to Ted and had the other offer and everything. So it wasn't.
Sorry about that. That was just my speaker getting ready for the podcast, but go ahead.
So anyway, it was crazy right there before Christmas. But it all worked out. I started working for Ted and was there, thought I'd be there forever because he and his wife are the nicest people that walk the face of the earth. And anyway, and then Drew Colesbean, I ran into him and he said he had a project for me in Bardstown with some people they've been in business with for a long time. And that was the preservation project. And I oversaw it. We had very different personalities. Yes. And so I left. Yeah. Now everybody knows the story. So I can say that and people understand what I mean by that. And so I left there and started my own consulting business. And then Sampson and Surrey was my second or third client. But Sampson was the parent company for Widow Jane. So that's how it all happened.
Yeah, that's a that is a
That's
whirlwind
that's
right there.
amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
you got like 50 years of experience in 10.
Well, I always say that because, Limestone Branch, we're working 60, 80-hour weeks. I mean, it was exhausting. But you leave there, it's like, well, I got 2 years of experience.
Who was that?
I understand the 60, 80-hour week.
Oh yeah, he's waving high. I thought he was waving high. I'm like, who's he?
I thought he was telling me to be quiet.
No,
that was just that I feel your pain.
I feel the 60, 80 week.
Not so
60,
much
80 hour
now,
week.
but for the first 30 or so years of where I'm at was insane.
Well, I'm
I
working.
still have my moments.
I'm working about 50-hour weeks at my regular job, and then this job so is at least 20 hours a week. So I'm right up there, 50, 70, 50,
Yeah, that's
70
fun,
hours.
Matt.
So it's fun,
Yeah.
but this isn't work for me. This is fun. I really enjoy doing this, especially hanging out with just people like you for an evening for, an hour and a half. It's just a blast. It's just, there's no doubt about it.
It's going to be longer than that if we don't get started.
Yeah, we got to
with the
get started. We're
podcast.
going to start that's a really good, that was a great YouTube special content.
Lisa's going to fall asleep and I'm going to turn into a pumpkin.
Yes. All right.
So-
All right.
Yeah.
So,
I'm gonna stay awake. I'll stay awake.
all right. So we're going to start recording on the podcast. So it's going to start now.
Dant Crossing, Gethsemane, Kentucky. Timeless hospitality that stirs the spirit. Dant Crossing is a one-of-a-kind destination for unforgettable weddings, memorable corporate events, day trips, and weekend getaways. The pastoral campus is anchored by Logstill Distillery and includes an amphitheater that seats 2,000, a 12-acre lake for fishing, and unique lodging options, creating an immersive experience that's rooted in the community and culture of our little slice of Kentucky. More attractions will open soon at Dant Crossing, including our 21,000 square foot distillery, which we will have the ability to produce 15,000 barrels of spirit each year, a network of wooded walking trails, fully functional private train depot, farm-to-table restaurant, and the Legacy, a premier wedding and events venue. Whether you're looking to host an event, book a stay, or reserve a tasting, we're ready to welcome you. Learn more at dantcrossing.com.
Spirits of French Lick is proud to introduce the Maddie Gladden Bottled and Bond Bourbon. This 4-year aged bourbon is double pot distilled and non-chill filtered, and has a full-bodied mouthfeel with eucalyptus, molasses, clove, ginger, and slight citrus, as well as grains of paradise. The finish is long and reappearing on the back of the tongue with notes of pepper, tobacco leaf, and mint green. All of our spirits are available for tasting and purchase inside the French Lick Winery and Distillery. Spirits of French Lick. Respect the grain, please enjoy responsibly, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Oh, show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For if we don't find the next whiskey bar, I tell you we must die. I tell you we must die. I tell you, I tell you, I tell you we must die.
All right. Welcome back to another podcast of the Scotchy Bourbon Boys. That was Little Steve-O singing the Alabama song. And tonight we have a very, very special podcast. We have Lisa Roper Wicker of Widow Jane Distillery.
All right.
I am Tiny. This is Xavier. We got that right?
I think so.
All right.
Greetings, everyone.
We are happy. You're not going to get it. All right.
I
So
wasn't sure if you're going to let me talk. That's all.
talk away.
No, I don't have anything to say.
Yeah, I figured that.
Yeah.
Hey, Fuck you. We've been having a little bit of YouTube fun right before
Right.
this.
Oh
correct?
my goodness.
Yes. It was
Yes.
like got a lot of history there. But tonight, what we got is we've got a shit ton of bourbon in front of us, and we have the person who blended it and made it in all different cases, and she's
rolled
gonna
it and pat it and marked it with a B.
and
Yep.
and hopefully she'll set us completely straight. But also we have a bottle of the Widow Jane Decadence, which I'm excited about. I don't know now, just as far as a pre thing, one of the things that Xavier here doesn't like is maple syrup. So I just want to see his face when he tries it. I've had it. I've sent off a couple samples to people. We were supposed to have you met Martin Nash, who was Super Nash, when we did our podcast at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and he was supposed to make it, but he wasn't able to for a bunch of different reasons.
Let me address that maple syrup thing.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
The deal was this: every stinking holiday, Christmas, Valentine's Day, and any other time that you would end up with one of those big sampler boxes of candy, I would get, we weren't allowed to pig out, we were frugal with everything we had, and I could pick one piece of candy, I don't know, per day or per week or whatever it was, depending on how big the box was. And without a doubt, you could set your clock by it. You could bet your fortune on it. I would pick the freaking maple piece of candy. Okay. And so I went from just sort of not liking it to hating it.
But
for that reason.
and
it stuck with me.
Were those candies Heggies, or were they a different chocolate?
They were all different.
Okay.
But
The Heggies is our chocolate place here in town that
right,
makes
they have
all the
fine
cream.
candy,
Yeah.
And so I just got
Can you hear me? I can't. Okay. You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I can hear you now.
Now,
Great.
Right.
yes. All right. We just switched over to the computer.
What was the last thing you heard me say?
You were talking about the tail end of your candy story, how much you hated them.
Well, how much I hated for that reason, but the last
And then you talked about the candy store. That was the very end.
about 2 years ago, I never liked Jack Daniels for that reason, because of the charcoal filtering that had a little bit of a maple taste. But I had some of that last year and I was able to choke it down. So I'm going to keep an open mind when I sample your wares here. Maybe I'll like it. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and then we actually did a Scotch. We have meetings here for the Scotchy Bourbon Boys here in Canton, Ohio, where we get together and everybody and we do tastings. And we did a line of Jack Daniels, and he actually didn't mind the Jack Daniels in that one. Now, we did drink Gentleman Jack, and I think that's one of the most horrible bourbons I've had in a long time.
At least that bottle was. Maybe we just.
I don't even think so. But what I am is a fan of bourbon. I mean, honestly, there's not been too many bourbons that I felt was bad. There's better bourbons, and then there's okay average, you know what I'm saying? But there, most of the time, if I drink a bourbon, I like it because I've always been a vanilla caramel kind of guy. You can hear us still? Yes?
I can.
Okay.
Okay, good.
All right. So, that's just why bourbon, now rye whiskey, for whatever reason, if rye whiskey, a majority, 90% of rye whiskeys taste horrible to me. It's just me. And there's nothing I can do about it. I taste, and I understand other people love rye whiskeys, but for whatever reason, I'm sensitive to that rye and that specific, if it's lacking the sweetness that a bourbon usually has, if you sweeten up that rye, I'll like it. But if you can't sweeten it up, it's just kind of like, it's so bad to me. I really want to make it leave my mouth, but I will drink it. All right. So right now we put in the Widow Jane 10-year, which is a 2019 from batch 161.
Wow, I've blended over 600 batches, so
Yeah.
that is early on.
Cheers.
So what did you think of your early on batches to now? I mean, how you've done so many. Has it evolved, or did you have better batches?
Oh yeah, it's definitely evolved. I mean, just like any other brand, right? Because if you're working with stock, that stock gets older unless you've run through it all. And then if you've run through it all, then you're into younger stock. So, we all know that there can be two sister barrels that were from the same lot in the same rick, the same years, and taste completely different. So it's always evolving, right? It's always shifting a little bit. There's always some basic notes I'm looking for when I'm blending 10-year-old. I'm looking for cherry and dark stone fruit, and then baking spice. And then after that, pretty much anything goes. But now I blend every last batch. I'm over 600. It's muscle memory in a way. I mean, I can almost just smell it and know exactly what it's going to taste like. Not always. There's still batches that I'm not crazy about, so that I break them apart and recombine them in a different way until I do like them. So it's always, definitely I'm getting a lot more polished about what I do, just with practice and everything. I never dreamed in a million years that, I produce over 600 batches of whiskey.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been crazy ride, right? And so, yeah, it's, when I started too, I had no idea how, the growth and the scope and like I said, some of my barrel stocks, some of my Tennessee early on was drinking a little bit younger than its age statement. Now it's drinking as old as its age statement. So I'm not even I'm working with the same whiskeys, but I'm not working with the same whiskeys. If that makes any sense.
No. Just for instance, this is a 2019. It's been opened, poured into a sample bottle, shipped up to me, and then it's probably been sitting for about another 2 months. So that in itself is going to, change the whiskey. There's and people
that makes me nervous to hear all that.
No, I found that really, really good whiskeys don't change too much. Like if you open them up and whatever, it's like, and then you drink them 2-3 months. Like for instance, I don't revisit a lot of, I don't get a chance to get back. The bottle gets opened. I try to avoid the neck pour. I do everything I possibly can, air it out, shake it up, whatever I got to do. But once I get into it, and then if I might return to it about a month later, just to see if there's been a change. But then a lot of my whiskey collection, which is now over 400 different bottles, it will sit because there's just not a time to go and drink them. You've had samples of this, you might have a little bit of this. Now I do know if you let it get to the bottom and it's just sitting there and there's like a pour or two left, you want to get that done, because as that starts to evaporate, you usually don't get too good of a result from that. It usually gets a little bit worse than better. But up until that point,
you leave, whiskey on your nightstand that you thought you were going to finish, and then you wake up.
Yeah, and then you try that. Well, the worst part is if you leave it and it's like in the middle of winter and it's dry, and the next morning all there is like a little skin to peel off the bottom of the Glencairn. But yeah.
No, what's really bad is when you leave the whiskey on the nightstand, you wake up at 4:30 in the morning and decide, well, I might as well finish it.
Yeah, except then it's not as good. It's pretty much evaporated.
Oh, it depends.
Yeah, it depends on what that 4:30 in the morning was, right?
Depends. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So this particular batch, this is really good.
Thank you.
I mean, the 2019 one is spectacular. Now we were sipping on the 2020 just before, because
I don't. Is this the one that has maple? Because I'm not.
No,
I'm not tasting any maple.
No, we'll finish with the maple.
Okay.
This has nothing to do. This is just 10-year Widow Jane that she's putting on the shelf now in 2019. So how big is a batch now compared to early on? I mean, is it bigger or is it the same?
No, they're all 5 barrels. They're all 5 barrel batches.
So how did you get the distribution to get better? That's because at first, like the first bunch of batches in Ohio, we didn't see anything like, we didn't see it. If we saw it, it was rare. But now when you put out a batch, I can see it. I'll see it and it's on the shelf and I can actually get it.
Yeah. I mean, it just growth, right? When I started, just like any new project, right? You get started. Samson and Surrey had bought the company. They ended up hiring some of the best frontline salespeople you could possibly imagine. In fact, I've said to them several times, stop doing such a good job, or we can't keep up. The year before last, we just had phenomenal growth. And guess what? We had phenomenal growth again on top of that year. So it wasn't even, we're at a new high, and then dang, like we did it again. Right. So, yeah, just, word of mouth, podcasts.
You're on the accelerated curve.
Yeah. So it's been crazy. I mean, and, as we get better at what we're doing, I've got the most amazing team. I just have the most amazing, there's only 15 of us total, and that's tours, bartenders, warehouse crew, bottling line. That's it total, 15 of us. And, we're all spread a little bit thin. We're all getting it done. But it gets crazy, it just gets crazy. So yeah, we've just been darn lucky. And so it's gone into better distribution, and, people can actually find it on the shelf.
So I am intrigued, and maybe it's because ignorance is bliss, but referring to myself, that is.
Yeah.
On your website, I'm seeing where it looks like you're doing kind of a hybrid of, unless I'm reading it wrong or it's just abbreviated on the website, you're doing like you start out in a pot and then end up column distillation. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Describe that just a little bit.
Well, we have what I call a split personality too, because what you're drinking is sourced and blended, right? We're buying those barrels from Indiana and Kentucky and Tennessee. Sure. And we're very fortunate. We have some pretty deep stock. And then we also make our own whiskey. It's just not ready yet. So we do release a 1-year-old expression at the distillery so people can get their head around what it is we're doing. And I was supposed to start building a distillery in Brooklyn 2.5 years ago. And guess what? I was supposed to break ground in April 2020.
Yeah.
So it's been put on hold, but we're back up and running again. In fact, I, talked again to the architects today. We've got our, process engineering in place and our structural engineering in place and architects in place. And our architects are the same people that did Rabbit Hole. And, so we're up and running and working on permitting and all those sorts of things. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, but anyway, in the meantime, because I don't have enough distilling capacity in Brooklyn, I do grow corn upstate New York outside of Avoca. And then that corn comes to New York and we distill it. And yes, we have a pot to column. We don't, when you see the photograph of the still, we don't use the big column on the right. We don't use the vodka column. We use the short 5-plate beer column, but so that's pot to column, which is very similar to what, the way I distilled it.
Are you bleeding off any of the heads before transitions from the pot to the column, or?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
oh yeah.
At that point.
Okay.
So that's the advantage. You can do the run on the pot, which then you have a lot more control over. And then when it goes into the column, then it becomes. Now you obviously are running the column still there, similar to the pot still, where there's an end of the run, you shut the column still down, right? You're not doing like a beam thing where it's 24/7.
It's not continuous
solid
casting.
columns.
No, it's definitely batch. It's definitely batch distilling. So
okay.
Yeah. And so at the same time, we have an open pollinated heirloom corn cross. It's a cross between Wapsie Valley and Bloody Butcher. We've trademarked it Baby Jane. In the meantime, for a couple of years until COVID hit, and we'll start growing again this year, we had the largest heirloom corn crop for whiskey in the United States, and we had it in Kentucky. Peterson Farms grew it for us. They grow for the big guys. In fact, it's just funny, talking to Connor O'Driscoll at Heaven Hill, and Peterson grows some of their grain as well. So that part's fun. We were the first craft heirloom project that they ever took on before, just because our scale was so big. We grew over 104,000 bushels of baby Jane corn. And so in the meantime, we'd done a trial run at Wilderness Trail to see how the corn, when I first started the project, there was corn in storage in New York. And so I brought all of it back. We ran some of it Wilderness Trail. They didn't have room for us to run anymore, but we decided it was good whiskey. So then we ran the rest of it OZ Tyler and had those barrels.
That's interesting.
Was putting the corn in New York just strictly a locational thing, or was there an analysis of the soil pH or something? Was there something that said, I got to have New York corn other than?
Well, the New York corn comes to Brooklyn to be distilled. So any of the Kentucky corn stays in Kentucky for me to distill there. So no, but these guys, they're not a co-op, but they're a collective of former dairy farms, and everybody knows the dairy farm industry, really suffered some losses. And so they regrouped growing grains for brewers and distillers. They grow a lot of heirloom grain.
Backing up to the process for just a minute, I just want to wrap my little senile pea brain around this. What are you then, you have distilleries that do all pot, distilleries that do all columns. You're doing both in the same run, basically. What are you leveraging by doing that? What is that doing for you to do it that way?
I'm not 100% if I'm following your question. So like the small pot that we have in Brooklyn is actually a Christian Carl still. They're, European. They originally were built for making brandies. So what I like about it is I inherited that still when I started the project. It was already there. What I like about it is it keeps the varietal characteristic in the heirloom corn, just like a grape varietal, right? In Kentucky, we're running on a column, right? So because the rest after the OZ Tyler experiment, now we moved everything to Castle and Key, and I distill at Castle and Key.
Ooh. Oh, okay. Good wisdom.
And so I run that. We go do, we'll do 2,000 barrels or 6,000 barrels or whatever. And then, then take a break and they have their other clients and all that sort of stuff. And so, and I've run some rye there as well. But so that eventually will get all repatriated to New York when I have the distilling capacity out here. But that's all column, it's, that's my life as a blender, knowing that whiskey's not going to be an exact match for what we're doing in New York, but that we'll be able to, blend those in the end.
So now OZ Tyler is now Green River.
Yes.
And that first Green River release just has hit. And it's going by, it's getting lots of good reviews. And I'm happy for that. But initially, when I went to OZ Tyler a couple of years ago, when they were trying to do the rapid aging, it was not the greatest. But at the same time, they were also doing the contract distilling, and that's when you were there. So they were able to do the regular distilling exactly how, and they weren't trying to run it through their, what did they call it? Rosy kind of thing, right? But it's kind of like, it's really, for me, when I went there and they showed me the process, and that's just right at the time when I was starting the podcast and everything. And it was just kind of like the one thing that I found throughout all whiskey is if you're trying to hurry it up by some process, I still haven't found the person who's been able to rapid age it. Now, I found good whiskeys where people have, maybe released it early because it's good distilling and whatnot. And then when they release it, they let you know it's young. So you kind of expect it. But I haven't found anybody where they've said this is a 6-year whiskey, but we've only aged it for 18 months, kind of thing. I haven't found that to work yet. Now, I don't know, in all your experiences, you probably tasted some of that. Have you ever found anything that's come close to just actual natural aging or? All right. So I'll just look forward to the future.
Yep. Also, I wanted to ask you, you talked about your water supply source. You found a limestone source approximately 100 miles north of where you're at. What is that like, trucking the water in to make that happen? I mean, I just imagine tanker trucks coming through the streets of Brooklyn.
We meet the water truck at 4 a.m.
Okay.
Yeah. yeah, that's how that happens.
So no traffic at 4 a.m.
Correct. Yeah. They like that 4 a.m. because they can turn around and get right back out of the city again between 4 and 5. So
every day.
no, oh no,
Depending
no.
on when you have runs scheduled. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, we're on a regular water schedule, but only because, you know, we're kind of on a regular distilling schedule. Yeah, it's quite the water. I mean, it's really delicious. And
She's crying. That's my granddaughter. He's gonna go.
Honey, it's okay.
She just that's what happens. She's been asleep.
oh no.
Yeah.
That's
So
a good girl. That's a good girl. Go lay down. It's okay.
we can I'll be able to edit that part. Hey Bill. Okay, you keep talking. I will go put my granddaughter back to sleep. We'll just you just keep asking.
I'm going to keep asking stupid questions.
Yeah.
Trying to sound intelligent.
Allie. It's okay.
Oh, so when you say you meet the truck without giving away any trade secrets, what does that involve? I mean, you're transferring to some other
Oh yeah, we just, you know,
intermediate container?
yeah, it all goes into stainless steel holding tanks, right? And we hold it till we need it because we proof the whiskey down with that water. It's we held the only water permit of its kind in the state of New York, you know, for withdrawing water for a whiskey product, right, or food, or for a food product. It did take some doing. You know, we were under another permit. Yeah, we were under another permit, and I dawned on me one day that, you know, one of these days, the FDA, in the 21 years I've been making alcohol, the FDA keeps threatening to put ingredient labeling on the bottle. And, you know, it's like, you know, we probably need to have it all lined up like it's a food ingredient, not just the fact that it's, you know, we're getting the water tested and we've got all the certificates and things on it. But we needed to do it a different way. And so we did it, we got it done. You know, at one time they're like, I don't know if we're going to, you know, you're going to be able to do this or not. And they got it all through because
that has to be a nightmare.
Oh my gosh, but we're ready to go. The second the FDA tells us, you know, we've got to have it put on the label, we've got it all figured out. So
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So for a while they were rebuilding their water truck, the water company, and didn't have something that was roadworthy that they were happy with. They were, you know, like taking a tank off of an old milk truck, and they were taking a chassis out of another truck, putting it all together. And because they wanted something a little bit smaller to run into the city for us, right? And so during that time, I was going up with a tank in pickup trucks and picking up the water myself and bringing it back. Yeah, of all the crazy things you'd never think you're going to do, you know, you're like sitting on the Brooklyn Bridge with this tank in a truck going, oh my gosh, if somebody had told me this 10 years ago, I'd never believed it. Yeah.
I just see that in the confines of what I've seen of New York. You know, I've been across the Brooklyn Bridge, I've been across the RFK Bridge, I've gotten lost in New York once or twice. I also did a sprint through Chinatown to Little Italy and down the middle of the street, but that's a whole nother story for another time. But at any rate, I just trying to coordinate the truck. I mean, ideally, they bring the tank truck in, back it into a bay in your distillery, and you hook the hoses up to it right there, and you're not double handling it, you know.
Right.
But obviously, logistically, that's an impossibility given your geography.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we hook the hoses up and run them across the sidewalk and into the warehouse, and
yeah,
it stays in storage, and we test it again, and yeah, it's all good.
All right.
There we go.
Here we go. Switcher. We're just doing this so you don't fall asleep. You know, you're going to say, who's going to be sitting down next? You know?
That's just crazy.
It'd be cool if we had somebody else who hadn't participated in the podcast to come and sit down, and I would act like it was tiny, and you'd be saying like, wait a minute, that's not him. You know?
Well, it's like with my granddaughter, what happens is that like it's like I got her to go to sleep before the podcast. So that was a really good thing. But then, you know, she had to wake up and go to the bathroom. So we're good.
Yeah. How old is she?
She's 5. She's going to be 6 real soon. So we are covering for her mom and dad.
My grandsons are almost 9, and the youngest is 7.
Yeah, I think, let's see, I've got 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 7 and 6, and she's gonna
Wow.
be 6. Yeah.
You got me beat. Yeah.
They're awesome though, aren't they? Aren't
They're
grandchildren?
It's such a cliche, but there's a reason it's a cliche because it's so wonderful. It's just so wonderful. You know, I'll come home. When I'm back in Bardstown, they just live a block and a half from me, right? And we all live downtown in the historic area, and they'll see me coming, right? You know, and I hear them scream my name and run down the sidewalk.
Oh,
It's the best, right?
that's neat.
When I
We'll play
come
Legos and yeah.
when I come home from work, she's just right there. She's at the
Of
door.
course.
It's just like it's kind of like it just makes you feel younger. That's just, there's an aspect of energy they have and love that.
Well, there's the stuff you can, I mean, you know, this is part of the cliche that you can't, you know, you didn't have time to do with your other kids, you know, so I can just lay on the floor and do Legos with them forever, you know, or, you know, watch a movie or just hang out or whatever, you know, so yeah, I love that part. Just,
That's
Yeah,
neat.
there's it. And then we get to do all of our fun things. So, all right. So you're finished with that one. Huh?
Yep.
So
my oldest grandson did say one day, he goes, when he was younger, he comes in my kitchen, he goes, Mamie, why do you've got so much whiskey? You know, and so someone asked me one time, they're like, you know, do they know like that you work in a distillery? I said, they go to school in Bardstown. And when you say my grandmother works in a distillery, that is not an unusual thing.
Right. That's probably
Yes.
commonplace.
Yeah, but you run distilleries. That isn't the normal thing.
That isn't, but you know, but for somebody to say, you know, does your grandma work in a distillery? It's not
There,
crazy.
yeah, not at all. Yeah. Elsewhere in the country, sure, but yeah, right there, you're good. I actually had a guy that listens to the podcast talk about that. He listens to the podcast, and I don't know why he does this with his 8-year-old daughter in the car. And he said that he was at a party, you know, a family get together, and she started explaining single barrels to the guests because and so initially they're like, well, did you have this? And she's like, is that a single barrel? And they're like, what? So she was picking up everything off the podcast. So
That's awesome.
I was telling my wife that it's like, we got to watch out from my granddaughter because she already knows everything she tells everybody about bourbon all the time. So there's no doubt when you're in the business or in the industry, they pick up everything. But I think
they're so surrounded by it, you know. I mean, you know, Dad was executive chef at Maker's Mark. So for when they were little, they're still little, but when they were even younger, you know, I think they thought it was a state park. I think they thought, you know, we go to
Maker's
but
Mark. Yeah.
it is a state park. I mean,
we go down and play in the creek, you know, and we go back up the old dead end road, and we watch the eclipse from the lake, you know, and all those sorts of things, you know. So I think for a long time it was just, you know.
Maker's Mark is so that property is so beautiful. I mean, you're there and then you're finished with your tour and you just walk around and it's just exactly like you said. It's like a park. I mean, it's just
unless it's raining an inch per hour, then you don't walk around that much. That was most of the day we were there. That was the Wednesday that, you know, last September. So
yeah, when the one where the torrential downpour, we were on a bus tour. And initially when I did the bus tour, we made the Maker's Mark kind of the focus. And then we went to preservation with Matt Jackson. Yeah. And then
I hired Matt. Yeah,
yes,
I hired.
He
what a hire.
He talked to us about that whole situation, which
he delivered my appliances, and I bought my house in Bardstown, and he delivered my washer and dryer and everything, and he came back. So his boss wanted him to clock out on a Friday afternoon, right? And so I'm like, no, it's fine. We can wait till Monday. And he came back after hours and said, if my wife had just bought a brand new washer and dryer and it wasn't hooked up, you know, I know she'd be really disappointed. And he came back on his own time. And so he started talking to me about what I did for a living, you know, and I guess he'd heard from somebody, you know, that I'm in the distilling world. And so we started talking, and sure enough, I called him. I took his information and said, you know, if something comes up, I'll call you. And I called him and said, you know, I can teach people everything else, but I can't teach people work ethic. And
That's
Can't
true.
teach people personality, and I can't teach people work ethic.
That's something is hiring in my business, IT people, hiring technicians and programmers.
Right.
My partner and I have always said that we will take 10% ability and 90% attitude
Yes.
over the reverse any day of the week.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Same thing here, you know, what I'm doing here as well. And, you know, I've cross-trained everybody here. Even the bartenders have, they're all forklift certified. I buy them all steel-toed boots. So, you know, but they all have remarkable work ethics. They're all just really good people and work really hard, and I can teach them the rest of it, you know, so.
Yeah. You can't teach.
Yeah.
But
They're smart. It's not like they didn't come to the table. These guys couldn't come to the table, you know, with some, you know, some really remarkable skills and some really remarkable backgrounds, but no one came from the distilling world, you know, nobody was already working in a distillery before they were at Widow Jane.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you're completely right there. That's one thing that we deal with all the time. Now we have the Lucky 13 in here.
Lucky
So
13.
explain this to me, because I've never had it, because the 13, the 14, and the 15, this is the first time I'm tasting it.
Do you know if you have the Lucky 13 single barrel or the Lucky 13 blend? What's the label say?
This is going to be a tricky, because this is where I definitely show because not only does he sends labels, but I mean, we're talking, look at this label. Can you tell from the label? it's just
You're on your own,
a little stop. Yeah, here we go. I will look.
A few podcasts ago, he was having trouble reading. I got my reading glasses. Let me just go ahead and take that from him. It's like I volunteered to fall on a grenade. This label was in red with black print on a whiskey bottle. And it was like, wait a minute, do we have to like rub lemon juice on this to get the print to be visible or what? You know, it was just impossible to see.
Okay, so it's 49.5% ABV, and it's batch 2, bottle 134. Does that help you?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So
is
it
it
a single barrel or is it?
It's a blend.
Okay.
Okay.
So what happened, excuse me, I have a little distillery thing going on here, so I'm going to do something real quick.
Yeah.
And say on the podcast. So we're always working, right?
Of course.
Absolutely.
Lucky 13. When I started at Widow Jane, the 10-year-old was a single barrel. One of the things I was hired to do was take the 10-year-old single barrel and turn it into a blend, so we didn't have to drop the 10-year age statement. And that's, you know, how the 10-year-old blend was started.
Was Widow Jane already an established distillery when you got there?
Yes, Widow Jane's 10 years old, and I've been there for 5 years.
Okay.
So Sampson and Surrey purchased Widow Jane 5 years ago last month, and had a very notorious previous owner, very not transparent story necessarily. So when I was hired, you know, there were a lot of skeletons in the closet, and we've worked very hard. I've worked very hard, and my team's worked very hard to clean all that up. And we've had great success with that. You know, the stories weren't so far off. It was back when everybody was, you know, not everybody. I do not mean that by any means. That was a slip of the tongue, but you know, several brands were having issues, right? Mm-hmm. So I get there. I mean, I have had other distillers screaming in my face. I had another woman distiller that we all know. She had to pull a guy away from me because he was screaming at me at a distillers convention in Pittsburgh because he found out I worked for Widow Jane and he's going to let me have it, right? She's like, no. Lisa's going to get it cleaned up. Just wait, give her some time. And I mean, that's how bad it was, right?
Wow.
It was so bad. And so anyway, we're you know, so that's part of the other reason I was hired, right? There was lots of reasons I guess I was hired, and started as a consultant with them because I already had other clients. And so I came on as a consultant initially, and for 1.5 years until Sampson and Surrey asked if I'd please come on full time and, you know, dismiss my other clients. And it was some tearful goodbyes, but I did. And yeah, so anyway, that's how the tenure got established, right? My bosses, were from Bacardi. They both run major sections of Bacardi internationally, and one of them's British, the other one's a Spaniard, and they have been a joy to work with. I know I can drive them crazy sometimes, and they've been really patient with me. So anyway, so we had such success with the 10-year-old. Our single barrel program had moved to a 12-year-old black label, right? They had already had that product as well, and I started getting some of those. At that point in time, those were all Indiana barrels, and I started getting those Indiana barrels, and they were under proof because we proved the single barrel to 99, and I was getting barrels in at 97, 95, 93. It's like, and I had like 60 of these, right? I mean,
they're already you've purchased them already. They're there.
Oh yeah. They were all.
It's what you have to use.
So, but they were delicious. I mean, they were really good. So I didn't want to like put them into the 10-year blend, right? I mean, they were definitely standalone barrels. And so I got the idea one day. I like called my boss. I said, you know what, this is what's happening. I'm just going to, maybe stair step proof them to whatever the closest proof is. And that's what we ended up doing, whether it was 93 or 95 or 97 or 99. I would proof them to wherever I could get them. And I told him, I said, I think Widow Jane is a little dark. It's like, I think we should call him Unlucky 13. He's like, Lisa, we're not calling anything unlucky. He said, let's call it Lucky 13. I'm like, okay, I can live with that. And so that's how the Lucky 13 happened. So, so we blew through those barrels, and we still had other stock, but we've had such success with blending. And I was getting, my other stock I had a nice clump of stock that was like 12 and 13 years old. And so, we did propose the blending and started blending Lucky 13 as well, and have had major success with it. I don't have a barrel limit on it. I sometimes blend 7 barrels, 9 barrels, 11 barrels. I've never blended more than 11 in Lucky 13, but I like odd numbers. So, I do the 5, 7, 9, or 11 in Lucky 13, but they vary more than the 10-year-old because I have, kind of an open license to it, as long as it's balanced, and it gives me some freedom to use some of the barrels that are really lovely and maybe not have a home in another product, but they're really spectacular. And so I was like, okay, well, I know where I'm putting that one, right? And yeah, so we've had great success with the Lucky 13. We've been really fortunate. I mean, it really has taken off. And
so what you're saying is you get these. So what I found is that larger distilleries, right? When they get these barrels, forever they had no idea what to do with them, because they get these barrels, they couldn't put it into the regular blend of what they were doing because it would mess up the whole taste profile. So then they'd have them sitting around. Now, a craft distiller like yourself, some of these barrels, if they're spectacular, you can sell them right out of the gift shop. That's what a lot of the distilleries are doing. I find that some of the bigger distilleries now are making craft whiskeys where they're doing shorter runs and that type of thing, and they're using those barrels. So, but talk about that. Talk about the fantastic, like, you get a barrel that has nothing to do with your profile, nothing to do with anything, but it's just so delicious. I mean, what's that like? I mean, when you get those barrels, and how many?
That's a new label is what it is.
Well, Lucky 13, you're putting a lot of those, but there's got to be the even more spectacular ones. That are you releasing them as single barrels at the distillery?
No, everything's good. Everything right now I'm blending. Yeah, they elevate a blend. It's definitely a way to elevate barrels that maybe are a little bit more run of the mill. Yeah, it makes them richer and stronger blends.
Well, the 13 right there compared to the 210s is a lot sweeter. There was a lot more. Well, you want to say sugar?
No,
right?
no, I detected more on the back palate, more oakiness. It wasn't necessarily bitter, but it wasn't sweet either. I thought it was less sweet than the first expression.
Now, see, we definitely have two different palates. And that's one thing that I always love about whiskey, because I exist in that world of whiskey groups and everything, as far as a podcaster. And there's always those people. Now, do you remember the first time that we ever had a conversation? I mean, it's like I had posted, and I feel embarrassed for this, that I thought it was a good whiskey, but it was expensive. And you were already part of the Scotchy Bourbon Boys, in which that was awesome. But I didn't even realize that, and all of a sudden you responded to me that purchasing whiskey to put into a blend is not cheap, and the price is being driven by having to purchase good barrels of whiskey. Now, thank you for schooling me on that, because I even right now I understand.
Was I polite?
Oh, you were super polite, and I was honored. Honestly, I was honored that you actually responded.
He
to
felt
what
even
I said.
worse about the Facebook complaint he made about you. So
No, I did not make any Facebook complaints. Asshole. No, but it's just seriously, that first time I was definitely honored, because I understand even so much more now what's going on. It's just now that there's all these blenders. For instance, the last podcast we had on Jade Peterson, and you're talking about Oceans. He's great. But when you explain to people, people are like, it's gimmicky. Oceans is somehow it's gimmicky. Wait a second. How is it gimmicky? They basically sail your whiskey around the world in different climates, cold and
pretty
hot.
Expensive gimmick.
And it's like, and okay, so if you don't like it, move on and say you don't like it, but don't try and say it's a gimmick, because because they don't have any problem selling all the bottles, right? So some people like what they're doing, but yes, there's other people who don't. And that's what we have, just definitely different palates. I understand his palate.
I don't think I was trashing her. I mean, I thought it was a fine expression, but there was a difference.
No, you were
I was
trashing,
diametrically opposite.
But you notice I picked up the sweetness, okay, of it.
And I picked up more sweetness on the first expression. Right.
So we definitely taste differently. And that's the great thing about
I would agree with you, but then I'd be wrong.
Yeah. No, you are always wrong. No. In all
fairness, Jeff has a much sharper palate than I do.
But in the sense, I might have a sharper
so
palate.
does Tiny.
But that doesn't mean your palate isn't as important to you. And that's the whole thing. You can't, as you know, you're not going to please everybody out there, right? There's just no way.
Well, and there's people out there, like you were saying at the beginning, there's people out there that they can't just politely say that, this is not their favorite expression or whatever. They have to trash what you're doing, and that makes me know people are like that.
Yeah, because I know the same thing. I know everybody's not going to like it, but it's really interesting. I had a friend's whiskey that was getting just shredded, and it's a really solid, good whiskey. And it's not because it's my friend's whiskey, but people's comments, it was just really, I just have to sometimes remove myself from that, anyway.
Yeah, it's tough that people have such miserable lives that they have to project their misery onto everyone else rather than being classy about it. And if they don't care for it, they could take some aspect of it they like, emphasize that, and say, and then politely say, well, it's not as strong as I'd have liked it been here or here, but I like this, and move on, or not comment at all. But no, some people just cannot be that way for some reason.
Well, but how are you better than someone else because you like something? It's like I like lobster and you don't, so I'm way better than you. It's just like, no, it's not how it works. So some people don't like lobster and some people do. And same thing with whiskey. But the great thing about bourbon and whiskey is that there's so many out there that you can find what you like. I mean, I've had to work my ass off to find ryes that I like. It's just, it was something. It's not like it's something that comes to me, and there's a lot of bad ryes I've gone through, but at the same time, it's not that it's not bad rye. It's just bad to me.
Right.
It does, yeah. And it's like, I understand that people, when I sit there and it tastes like something that I don't even want to say, but to somebody
But
else,
you
that
have
like
said it many
yeah, I
times.
said
But I'll
it, yeah.
thank you not to say it.
I
this
won't
time.
say it this time. We're in front of Lisa, so I'm not going to say it.
Act respectable.
Lisa cusses like a sailor, so.
Okay, so I tasted so Bob Dylan has his brand of Heaven's Door, right? So I was like, oh look, here's a 3-pack. It's like I'll do that. That's a podcast in a box.
The Watershed Story. A watershed moment might be pivotal, but it might also be quiet and fleeting. It could be a monumentous occasion, a cause for celebration, an enormous triumph, or a small daily victory. A watershed moment could be a rekindling or an observation or a gathering. Any opportunity to relish with friends and family. It's whatever you choose to cheers to, who you're gathered around, and whatever's worth celebrating. We founded Watershed Distillery on the principles of community in 2010. We wanted to live in, work in, and contribute to the community in which we grew up. We aimed to create spirits and stood apart in quality and character. Along the way, we set out to form a community of our own, one that could gather together to savor, celebrate, and enjoy good spirits and company. We've grown from a tiny little still and 2 guys in jumpsuits to a dedicated team of over 40 people and 2 much larger stills. If you're ever in the area, stop by so we can introduce you to our team and pour you some of our award-winning bourbon. Creating it was our watershed moment, but we want to hear about yours.